Kia ora tātou, welcome to Hard Hat Talk. I'm your host, Greg Ward, and this episode, we're delving into modern methods of construction. With the increase in prefabrication and the popularity of modular construction, our BCOs are encountering a range of issues. And to highlight these for our members, we're very pleased to bring you this interview with Manager Inspections for Auckland Council and Director for Boynes, Jeff Fahrensohn. Jeff, nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let's just dive right into this. What is going on with MMC, Modern Methods of Construction?
We have quite a lot of projects going on in Auckland at the moment. It hasn't taken off as much as they had predicted a few years ago, and there's a few issues behind that. But generally, there's probably a lot of issues that could be solved if we talk some of the learnings from the design phase and the factory QA.
Actually, talking about that, let's jump into that QA side of things. What are the risks when factory QA isn't detailed enough to catch New Zealand Building Code compliance issues?
If it's not detailed enough, there ends up becoming a lot of deconstruction when it gets to New Zealand, unfortunately. And you can't stress the importance of having a good, robust QA, which is looked at and decided and agreed way before they even put the building consents into New Zealand. So we're talking about it at the pre-application stage. And that could involve things as simple as the level of detail in the plans. So we expect manufacturing level detail or allo level of detail 400 if they're using BIM or higher. And that helps provide the unskilled or the factory workers that are not familiar with the building code a better level of guidance and when they're putting these together and assembling them.
So talking around quality issues that we may have, how important are factory audits and the factory QA audits, and what are some of the challenges that BCAs have with them?
So we start with the original QA audit to determine that they actually do have a system in place and it's embedded. And then we, I guess you could call it keeping them honest. Every year, or depending on the risk profile, obviously, of the building, it could be 6 monthly every year. We do a QA audit to make sure that they're continuing with that process. And that's because you see factory workers change. You have product substitutions happening all the time. And so we've got to make sure that they stick they stick to that QA regime as much as possible. And our inspectors, we will do that in person. We actually have a few people that fly around the world and visit these factories. We use third-party consultants and contractors to do that as well. And we also carry out remote audits.
So what needs to be checked then if you're heading to these factories? When you're setting up that initial factory QA regime, what's the overarching things that you're doing?
It starts with the design. So we recommend a level of detail of 400 if they're using BIM. Then we move to the products themselves, the products and materials. We check for compliance, and then we move into the assembly part of it, how they put it together, and the ITPs, or the inspection test plans that they carry out to check their own work, so to speak. And that's that quality control that we expect to see.
So alongside that, what product compliance issues or challenges do you see with overseas factories?
It's interesting. The products that we've seen in the past, you've got to get your head around the standard that they're using, the compliance standard, and equate that to a New Zealand version. Now, with the new product specification process being introduced in New Zealand, that's going to make things a little bit easier. But if you take, for instance, asbestos, if you were looking at cement fiberboard from other countries, and this is not just this is quite widespread. As an example, the US and some European countries, as well as China, consider asbestos-free anything less than 1%, whereas we have a very hard tolerance of 0% asbestos in products. So when they say it's asbestos-free, we have to do some testing. So we may require sampling in those situations. And that goes with all other things like brass fittings. We're looking at lead leaching. We're looking at plasticizer migration, electrical wiring. There's a heap of stuff that will be going right down into the detail at the very beginning.
Talking around buildability issues now, what sort of issues come up when designing how volumetric modules are erected on site?
Designing for compliance and is one thing. Designing for buildability is another. And we find that's generally missed, particularly when they're not sure how the methodology the builder is going to follow on site. So you have a volumetric unit that needs to be racked and stacked on site. They've got to design how they're going to fix those together. And we've had situations where people have had to remove linings to get at bolt fixings to secure them. So, yeah, having that at the design phase is really important.
And alongside that, how does mold and moisture damage occur in container-type modules shipped from overseas?
Generally speaking, it's not so much the container itself; it's more the way they wrap things and the humidity or the temperature and climate that the country is they're sourced from. As an example, if you're coming from a Southeast Asia, where they have a lot of high humidity, if they're wrapping a module very watertight, airtight, and shrink wrap, moisture is trapped in those units. And as they travel through the hemispheres and are stored in New Zealand, there is a possibility of condensation. And that condensation can sit, it's got nowhere to escape. And generally, that's where you may get mold growth. And worst case scenario, you end up with fungal damage.
So what does that mean then in terms of the sort of ongoing problems? So if you've got the construction moisture in the large rack and stack modules?
That's where going back to the design on how you're going to transport them. And if you do know that you're going to be coming from a very humid country to, say, the South Island in New Zealand, you want to make sure you've got plenty of ventilation designed into that packing. And then when they do arrive, it's really important not to stack and store them anywhere for a long period. You want to actually get them acclimatized to New Zealand by unwrapping them and putting them in some place where they can dry out and be protected from the weather.
You talked earlier about having to remove linings in certain cases to get to access ports or bolts and connections. How do New Zealand builders' tolerances affect the fit of prefabricated panels and modules?
That's a real challenge. So New Zealand builders, while they're very good, they generally have a tolerance when they build of, say, let's take an example of a concrete slab. They could be 15, 20 millimeters out over a 12 meter slab. And in New Zealand, when you're building in situ, that's no problem. But when you bring in a prefabricated product or volumetric unit, it's built to exact measurements. And if it doesn't fit that slab, this is where the builders take that into their own hands. Either they're cutting into structural slabs to make it fit, or worse still, they're cutting the prefabricated wall units over wall panels to fit, which is a real issue because we've seen builders out there that have butchered panels using chainsaws to try and make them fit into a square product into a round hole. Doesn't work.
Some might say it's the good old Kiwi ingenuity and number 8 wire mentality, but it doesn't really help in terms of compliance. Why is module assembly on site so complex for BCAs to inspect properly?
It's different from your traditional inspection regime where you have milestones during construction that we're familiar with. With modular, you may have multiple of those situations happening at one time. So as an example, in medium density projects where you've got things like fire ratings and acoustic design requirements, you're putting two products together that may have things interconnected. Plumbing, there's wrap cavity cladding, junctions. And so where those interfaces occur, you may be carrying out multiple inspections at one time. So a structural inspection for the fixing of it, fire rating inspections, insulation for acoustics, plumbing fixings. And so they all, because they're penetrating a fire separation, also mean passive fire is very important to watch. So yeah, it's not something that you normally cover with standard inspection types in New Zealand. You have to actually make a hybrid type inspection to cover those elements. And that goes right back to the start when they're planning the project pre-application meeting. You can start discussing that there in terms of whether you use third-party independent people to do some of that sign-off or the BCOs do that themselves.
Well, there's some great advice there. And I'm assuming that the challenges that we've discussed It's not an exhaustive list.
Oh no, there's there's always challenges, and it's unfortunate. The thing that I see is they're repeated mistakes. There's a lot of IP, and people are very reluctant to share information on the industry. We can see a side by side project having the same issues, 6 months apart because they don't share that information. So that's a real key one for us. We try and provide presentations to the building industry where we can to show some of these learnings. And just simple things like, probably going back here, but in terms of detailing, if you can imagine, if you look at a set of plans in New Zealand, it'll show a smoke alarm in a bedroom. You won't see dimensions on that smoke alarm where it's going. Everyone knows you put it, where it should fit, where there's no dead air spaces near corners or nooks or crannies. But unfortunately, we've seen situations in factories overseas where the workers have said, oh, we don't want a smoke alarm smack bang in the middle of a ceiling in our bedroom. It doesn't look nice. Let's jam it in the corner so it's out of the way. Things like that compound over time. And when they get to New Zealand, we're kind of deconstructing a lot of that sort of stuff. Now, if that was sort of shared more widely, you wouldn't have those errors. So that one factory now knows where to put smoke alarms. But the next, we've got 23 factories across the world we're dealing with, from Estonia all the way through to Australia. And we're seeing the same issues time and time again.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge for our BCOs and for all BCOs around the country as well. Really appreciate you joining us here for this extremely informative and very insightful discussion. What can our boys members do if they're looking for further information around MMC?
Going back to that message about sharing information, we are happy to share our findings. Like I mentioned, we've got 23 factories that we've assessed. 7 or 8 of them are the main ones in New Zealand, but all the rest are overseas. So if you've got people contacting you and are talking about possibly bringing in some, there's a chance that we may have already been to that factory and give you some very good intel. We're happy to share that information. I just had a meeting with Southland District Council last week regarding a proposed project down there. So, more than happy for you to make contact with us in Auckland.
Brilliant stuff. Jeff, thank you very, very much indeed. Really appreciate you joining us here on Hard Hat Talk.
Thank you. My pleasure. Cheers.
You're here with Hard Hat Talk. Watch out for more informed updates to come. Only here with the Building Officials Institute of New Zealand. Ka kite.